Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richmond Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, May 21st, 2025. It looks like we have 5 members, so we do have a quorum, and Tom Astley from MMC TV, so it will be recorded and available to watch on YouTube at some point. So welcome, everybody. Does not look like we have any guests at this point, but you never know. So we'll start by looking at the agenda, reviewing the agenda, making sure that that's what we want on it and nothing else. Any comments about the agenda or the order of the agenda? Okay, not seeing any hands or hearing any comments, we'll continue with the posted agenda and move on to reviewing the minutes of our May 7th, 2025 meeting. Any corrections or additions or comments to be made? Okay, not seeing any hands. We will accept those minutes into the record as written. All right, and moving on to our substantive agenda. If you all recall, we were asked by the Select Board to revise our recommendations that we made concerning the Jolina Court zoning district. And the step 1 of that process was to remove the commercial requirement for the 3/4 of building 1 on the ground floor that is not facing directly onto Bridge Street. There is 1 unit on the ground floor of building 1 that is 900 square feet approximately, and we are allowing that to retain the commercial requirement. So the place that this would happen in the zoning is in the PUD section, because it's the PUD section that puts these restrictions on mixed use developments, where the commercial, where's the residential, etc. And so Keith and I created some language that would fulfill the requirement of the Select Board. And what we would like to do is tonight have the Planning Commission approve it for sending back to the Select Board, who is then going to review it at their June 2nd meeting. So the language is on the screen. It's section 5.12.2 G. There's also a little bit in B, which crosses out the fact that we weren't originally allowing any residential PUDs. In other words, buildings that had only residences or residential units in them. But we are now going to allow that, except for building 1, which is singled out in item G. But otherwise, you may have a residential PUD in the Jolina Court district. So we've crossed out the part in B that says you can't do that. Moving on to G, we have added this language that says residential uses shall be allowed on any floor except for any building fronting directly onto Bridge Street, in which case the 900 square feet of the first or ground floor nearest to Bridge Street will be restricted to commercial use.
Oh.
Ian, you have a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say you can get rid of the word that's in there. Maybe.
Well, let me read
I'm
it
splitting hairs, sir.
Well, I think that's right. It should be in which case the 900 square feet that nearest to Bridge Street shall be restricted to commercial use, not that shall be, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know that's not the substance of this conversation, but
Yes, well, I could read it either way. I think if you want to take that out, I think that's okay.
okay.
I wasn't an English major, so take anything I say with a grain of salt.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, I think it will work without the that. Let me read it again. Residential uses shall be allowed on any floor except for any building fronting directly onto Bridge Street, in which case the 900 square feet of the first floor nearest to Bridge Street shall be restricted to commercial use. Yeah, okay, that's fine. We can take the that out. Does that work for you, Keith?
Yeah, it does. One of the I wouldn't say concern is that this isn't the only parcel in the JC district. You do have that, the RCK parcel. So I'm just thinking of the next zoning administrator, how they would do that. I'd like to, you don't want to say buttermilk. It might not be buttermilk forever. Maybe we should install the parcel ID number on that to make it more specific, which is
Well-
BR0039, I believe, but go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my feeling was, so this only applies to PUDs, so it does not apply to RCK right now.
Yep.
Which is not a PUD. So in the instance that that RCK building was somehow turned into a PUD, it would apply
Mhm.
to that
not-
building, but perhaps we would like that. Perhaps we would like to say that if it becomes a PUD, the first floor has to remain commercial. I mean, right now it's just a building and it can be
Yep.
anything. It can be a residence, it can be commercial. So I suppose you could look at this as removing an option from the RCK building if it were to begin to become a PUD.
Which I will admit is highly unlikely.
Right.
I mean, this captures what we're trying to do. I think the way to remediate this would be to put BR0039 in there somewhere. But I'm not overly stuck on it. It flows fine. Might be a little bit too nitpicky.
Yeah, well, I mean, the concern on the other side was to try not to make it spot zoning, which of course it already is spot zoning, but if it applies to the whole district, you could argue that it's less spot zoning.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's the con on the other side of the pro.
Yeah, I think I would argue that it is spot zoning, and it's almost better to be straightforward about that by putting the parcel number in instead of sort of pretending that it's not spot zoning. But yeah, I could see either way seems fine. This seems fine.
Yeah.
What is a PUD? Can someone explain that?
It's a planned unit development is what it is. And the idea behind it is to consolidate as much as you can in a small area based on the size of a parcel. It's really, the idea is to use the infrastructure more efficiently.
So, for instance, how would the RCK building, we're assuming that there's not room for two buildings on that parcel. So, Brighton, if there's any thing that's not specifically allowed in the zoning, for instance, you want to put several buildings on a lot that's not allowed, you can make it into a PUD. Or if you want to put mixed residential and commercial building that's not specifically allowed, but you want to do that, then you can make it into a PUD, which gives you the ability to do certain things that aren't otherwise allowed in the zoning. Or you might put buildings closer together than is actually allowed, but because it utilizes the space better, and it works better in the sort of the outlying areas, you know, where you might have a development that doesn't meet all the exact requirements, but utilizes the space well.
And then you're subject to DRB review also.
Exactly. Then you're subject to DRB review, and you know, there used to be a master plan development, which we removed because it was ineffective and troublesome, which said that if you make a PUD, you have to make a plan for the whole parcel. Well, people don't really always know what they want to do with the whole parcel, so we got rid of that piece. But it does allow you to make some adjustments to the zoning. So what would a PUD look like in the RCK case?
It'd be interesting looking, that's for
I
sure.
mean, if you had, like, if you turned the ground floor into a residence and you had businesses upstairs, or what about if you turned the upstairs into a residential unit and had the ground floor as commercial?
Oh, sure.
Would that need to be a PUD in this district? I don't know.
I don't know either, to be honest with you, but the way this reads is fine for our purposes, to be honest, you know.
Anybody else want to comment?
What's upstairs in that building now?
It's vacant.
Oh, and there have been offices up there, various little offices of
In the
various
past,
sorts.
yeah. I think that there was a residence up there at one point, a long time ago, but I know talking to Rob, it's vacant right now.
Yeah, I only remember there being a couple of different businesses that have gone through there through the upstairs, but
Just to be clear for public who may not be familiar, we're talking about the Richmond Community Kitchen Building, the former Blue Seal Feeds Building.
Yes.
so this is the only other building in the Jolina Court zoning district. So Chris, what do you think? I mean, should we highlight the fact that it only refers to the Creamery and not to the whole district, as Brighton has suggested, not beat around the bush that it's actually not spot zoning?
Well, you mean make it clear that it is spot zoning.
Exactly, make it clear that it is spot zoning by specifying that we're talking about the Creamery development.
I think it always helps to err on the side of clarity. I think I agree with that thinking about it, with Brighton's proposal, just because it is what it is. It's specific to this specific situation.
Anybody
putting
else?
Is there a like a law against spot zoning, or is it just something you should shy away from?
Yeah, there is definitely a law and precedence on spot zoning for sure. And you want to be as clear as possible.
So
But
then-
it's a high bar though to prove spot zoning, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And the zoning for this district was really always spot zoning.
Mhm.
The interim zoning was put together to allow the development to proceed and the brownfield to be cleaned up and all of that junk. So that was originally, it was interim zoning that was just for that. When we put the permanent zoning into place, we did talk about trying to meld it into the downtown district, trying to make the zoning all part of the downtown district. We found it too difficult because it was such a unique situation. So we continued with the interim zoning concept of just having it basically be its own district. So, I mean, in a way, it has always been spot zoning, but it is a different kind of district from the downtown in a way. So you could look at it like that. So.
Thanks
Mark.
for the explanation.
Hey there. I honestly, I'm not really sure what the problem would be with just having that zoning, any doors facing Bridge Street must be businesses. I mean, at this point in the game, are we really going to force all of the Blue Seal Feeds building to be commercial when we're pushing everything else to residential. I say we just not specify any property in that district facing Bridge Street. The front exposed door on the main level has to be commercial. So if they decide to subdivide and put an apartment in the back or one upstairs, are we really going to care that much?
Well, that's fine. The only problem would be if they wanted to put a residence where the commercial space is.
Well, aren't we zoning against that by stating that the property facing Bridge Street must be commercial?
Right, well, that's the way it is right now, and there's a point to
Oh,
doing
that's
that.
the whole floor. And now we're just saying that it's the door exposed to Bridge Street that must be commercial.
Well, it's the first
I'll put
900 feet, the
Not
first
square
900 square feet.
Is there another way we can phrase that?
Is there what?
Oh, another way to rephrase it, yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that, Keith?
I'm sorry, Mark, I was answering what you were saying, though. Is there another way to rephrase that, I believe is what you said.
Yes. And your answer?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So then, I mean, if this is the game we're going to play to enable them to put residential on the back half of that building, then we should be just giving everyone in that district those same options.
Well, we're giving them the option right now of putting it in the back 3/4 residential. So if you left it with the 900 square feet, which is the size of the unit that actually faces Bridge Street in
Yeah.
Building 1, that's why we put the 900 square feet in, because that's the size of the unit that is facing Bridge Street. That would
Right.
probably take up, I would think, the
And
whole
what's
square footage of the ground floor of the Richmond Community Kitchen
Right,
building.
Right.
the floor plan? Like, how big is that floor plan? If we're saying the front 25% of the building should remain commercial on the first floor, if we use that as a percentage of the first floor area,
We could do that.
That works.
then it allows Richmond Kitchen to do what they want, and it's not as spot zoning as it would be, because I certainly don't
Wow.
consider that district at all spot zoning, because it is such a unique district where it is formal commercial along the railroad, no abutments to residential anywhere. I mean, that's a very unique space. I don't have any problem considering that a separate
So-
district.
I can take the total square footage and do the percentage of what 900 square feet is and apply that to the district.
Of the footprint, right? Not
Yep.
counting those floors. but-
Correct, the footprint, yeah. just
Yeah,
the
it's
footprint.
approximately 25%, because I think it's
36,
46.
Yeah, okay. So we'll get that number, install that percentage in there as opposed to a
Even
hard
from
square
third
footage.
or whatever, or we can go less than by mandating it, and if the 900 square feet is 27%, we could just say the front 25%.
Right.
That way, oh, they've got a little extra that's still commercial. That's fine, because commercial's allowed everywhere.
Yeah, I like the percentage aspect instead of the hard 900 square foot call out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we should allow for the unit that exists
Mhm.
to be able to be the one that be the item that stays commercial. I mean, I would hate to say 25% and actually, 900 square feet is a little bigger than that, is like 27%, and then they'd have to, change their walls or something. I mean, the idea is to let that
They
first
wouldn't have to change
unit,
their walls. We have to say at a minimum, there has to be the front 25% exposed to Bridge Street. And if that square footage is 27%, then bonus, they've got a little extra commercial. You know, we could even cut it down to 20% just to allow the buffer that says, okay, this space facing Bridge Street with storefront on Bridge Street is commercial. Everything else up and back is
Yep.
could be residential, but is certainly allowed to be commercial as well.
I think that's fine. Administratively, that is not difficult, but
Right.
I think that you need a percentage and you need to allow the current unit that exists to fit into that without them having to do a song and dance.
I'm pretty sure we're all in agreement, or everyone
Okay.
who has been speaking recently. I think that you're agreeing with each other in different words. That's my perspective.
All right, so
And
I
I
have a-
agree, Mark. I think this is a good proposal.
we'll
So-
put in a percentage instead of the feet.
I have a question.
Yep,
So none of this applies to Buttermilk Unit B, right? Because it won't be
Correct.
fronting on Bridge Street. And so in
building
that,
building two you're talking about?
whatever, yeah, two.
Okay,
And so that can be 100%. It basically is not affected by this, what we're talking about here.
right.
Okay, just double checking about that. And there's not any other building that would be affected by this. It's really just Blue Seal and the Creamery.
Right, if we assume that the words fronting directly onto Bridge Street is clear enough, do you think, Keith, that that's a legally clear set of words?
I do.
Okay.
It's
So,
certainly easy to administer, so.
Yeah.
From a legality point of view, yeah, if we turn it into law, it's legal. Yeah, that's pretty simplistic.
yeah. Okay, so you would have to find out what percentage of the actual square
Yep.
footage is 900 square feet. All right, so we can do that, and then shall we take a vote to see if people are fine with sending this back to the select board to fulfill step 1 of their requirements? If someone wants to make a motion as amended, this document to be approved, that would be great.
I'm sorry, just since we're messing around with the PUD section, I don't know why I sort of thought it'd be more in the Jolina Court zoning, but if we're messing around with PUDs, wasn't there some concern, or at least I know I had some, about the use of allowing residential PUDs in commercial districts?
Yes, there is concern about that, but the way you would fix it would vary depending on whether those people want residential to be in the commercial district or don't want it to be in the commercial district.
What do you mean, those people?
The people who live there, who own the properties there, like Danny Noyes on, if they specifically do not want there to be residential, then we would have to alter that one way. If they want to allow residential, then we would alter it a different way. There's another concern about that, which is whether or not a residential PUD is a type of PUD or not. But that question is going to require looking through the rest of the zoning to understand how it's used differently in different sections. Like if you say, for instance, in one section, it might say, a PUD is allowed, blah, 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 blah. If you have said in your PUD section that a residential PUD is a type of PUD, then actually the PUD includes residential PUDs. But in other parts of our zoning, we have separate rules for PUDs, which are commercial or mixed, and residential PUDs.
Depending where they are. Yeah.
It's an ambiguity that needs to be fixed, but it needs much more work than this, than what we want to do here to fix that.
All right.
So-
I thought that might be a good priority for us as we're looking for where our next directions take us.
Yeah, well, definitely, Mark, when we talk to these people in the commercial district on Railroad Street to see how they feel about residential, hopefully they'll allow it upstairs or whatever, we need to know how they feel, then we'll be able to fix that, and that will inform how we fix that other question that I just mentioned. So I think we should just go with this right now and get it back to the select board so they can carry on with their telling us what to do.
Very well.
So if someone wants to make a motion to forward the amended version of this,
I'll make a motion to forward the amended version of this language to the select board.
Second,
seconded by Chris, okay. And so Keith, you're gonna work out a number, right? A percentage,
I shall.
okay.
And then go under that.
Well, go under that.
Oh, I'm just gonna take the 900 and do what the floor plan states and use that as the percentage.
Right, that sounds good. Okay, any more discussion about it? Hearing none, favor?
okay,
can raise
just
your-
last thought. How
Yeah,
about at least 900 square feet? That gives them some more flexibility because they don't know what they're going to do with that floor yet. If they get a tenant in who needs some more floor, they might build specifically. It gives them flexibility.
well, they already have the flexibility to put commercial anywhere on the first floor.
Correct.
They don't have to put residential on the back
Okay,
half or on the
okay.
ground floor of building two, either for that matter.
No, I see. Because it's still restricted to. Yeah, sorry. Never mind.
Okay. So, any more discussion? If there's no more discussion, everyone can raise their hand to signify an aye vote.
I'm verbally gonna go say aye.
Okay, you may say that, you may say aye, and I guess we don't have Allison here yet on the phone, but all right, so the motion passes 5-0. Brighton, oh, was that a hand for a vote?
Yes, it was.
Great. All right, so we will send this back to the select board. They will be talking about it at their June 2nd meeting. And they will also be talking about what we're going to talk about now, which is item number 6. So the way they organized their requirements to us for revising what we submitted to them was, that was step 1. Step 2 is to talk about residential density. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it today, even though they haven't told us exactly what they want. In the memo, it gives my impression of what went on at that select board meeting, which is that basically they wanted more density. They were unsure about the residential bonus program. They were kind of in support of the idea of the residential bonuses. As Chris suggested last time, they were not wholly, distressed with what we had proposed. They liked the elements of it, but the numbers didn't work for them. And also they wanted to talk about raising the height. So on the 2nd, after they've talked about this one we already talked about, they will now be discussing how they want us to revise this relative to residential density. We don't know exactly what they're going to say, but I put together some things to think about based on the work, all the work that we did on this, just in case they don't want to reinvent the wheel and think up something completely new about density. So just thinking about what they said, they want to increase the residential density. And of course, what they have always promoted was to make it the same as the village downtown density of 24 units per acre, developable acre. The most straightforward thing they might ask us to do is to just raise the base residential density to 24 units per acre. This would give them a total of 72 units for the whole project instead of 45 units. Another thing they might do is they might take that, the raising of the base density to 24 units per acre, and add on the residential density bonus program, which is going to give them 90 units per acre if we allowed them an additional 18, let's say, units. If the total density, which is the base plus the residential bonus program, if we allowed them to go up to 30 units per developable acre, then they would be able to put a total of 90 units in their whole project. And you know, what we're assuming is that they're going to put some of these residential units in the back half of building 1, where we've just taken away the commercial requirement. Let's say, for instance, they put 6. You could get 6 small units in the back of building 1. So they would have 20 in building 1. And if they had a total of 90, they would have 70 in building 2. So that's something they might do. They might want to take both of those pieces and add them on top of each other. And then you could make some kind of compromise. You know, you could increase the base density not quite to 24, but to 20, and then you could put the residential density bonus on top of that to get the whole thing up to 24. So just, you know, we ought to be thinking about this, because we're only going to have one meeting to talk about it, which is the 2nd of June, since we're not having a meeting on the 18th of June. We're going to want to have kind of a thought about how we want to think about this. The other couple of questions that they should be considering in the course of this discussion is the Tier 1B discussion, because they will come under the Tier 1B if we opt in, if they have 50 or less units. So for instance, if they get a total of 90 units and they put 20 altogether in building 1 and they have 70 left, if they want to take advantage of 1B, they will not be able to put all of those 70 units in the building, even if we increase the height. So that's a factor. Are they going to opt in or not? Well, we'll talk about that as another one of our agenda items. Mark.
Hey, I was just, I thought in that conversation with, sorry, trying to turn on my camera while I'm talking just to be polite, but I'm also having dinner. I apologize.
Yes, no, it's good. We like to see you.
Well, I don't know why. But I thought that they were talking about in that last select board meeting how they were not in any hurry for building 2. So I'm just saying that I'm not sure we have to have all of our decisions made by next week, the next meeting, because I think we could postpone this and have a deeper conversation that actually hopefully engages more community discussion, perhaps with the you know, to piggyback along with all the public outreach we're doing for the town plan. This seems like this is a big deal. I think I always have. But now we're going from where we are up to 24 units. And then you 70 units?
Yeah, well,
You
I
know,
mean,
is and I get it that the select board was leaning towards that.
mm,
But that's a freaking lot of permits. I'm not so sure the town, I'd like to think that the town might have a deeper discussion about that before we just say, oh yeah, 70 and then push it through. Select board pushes it through and all of a sudden you've got a 5-story behemoth apartment building with what I have always feared, very poor traffic management.
mm,
So all I'm saying is what they said was that they are not pushing to build unit 2 at this point. It's like a year or two out for them.
building 2. Yep, not
Yeah,
before
so-
July 1st of
Right.
27 when the interim B1 expires. Yeah.
What interim?
Well, there's an
Interim.
interim 1B that takes you up to July 1st of 2027, which
Oh,
everybody
the
is
1B
entitled
stuff.
to.
Yeah, no,
The
that
1B,
all
yeah.
aside, if we come any close to what we're talking about, they're not going to qualify for that anyway. So that kind of is moot. But I think the discussion doesn't need to be pushed forward before and finished and sent back to the select board before July.
Yeah, well, I think as long as we're thinking about it, and we might want to have a, discussion about the height question to see where we stand on that, if we want, because if they do have a significant number, if the select board suggests that they have a significant density increase, they're either going to have a bigger building with a bigger footprint, or it's going to have to go up.
Right? Yeah.
So we might want to have a discussion about that. If they close the public hearing, so there's the question whether or not they're going to close the public hearing next time or not. Do we have a recommendation about that, Keith, whether they should keep the public hearing open? Isn't there, if they close the public hearing, is there a time limit that they have to make a decision or not by?
I'm not sure if it's
Was that a public hearing?
Sure.
Was that just information session?
No, that was their public hearing,
it was a
but
public hearing.
it's open.
won't-
It's been continued till at least June 2nd, the public hearing. So
Right.
on June 2nd, they could either continue the public hearing,
Correct.
or they might decide they want to close the public hearing and just do deliberative work. And I mean, I think we need to know whether or not that is going to set the clock in motion. I can't remember offhand.
I think that if they close the public hearing, they would be making that decision that night. I mean, that certainly would be my recommendation. I don't think there's a clock that ticks like the DRBs.
Right?
Because that's a permitting issue. As soon as the decision is made, it's got to be taken care of in 21 days. So that's really the only issue.
But they could close the public hearing and not make a decision, presumably, because they can deliberate about it. And also they have to send this back, if they decide to say, for instance, to the Planning Commission, we want you to increase the residential density. Just, they don't have to be specific, but we are assuming they're going to be more specific. We ask them to be specific because we weren't able to really know what we wanted for the numbers, except,
Right.
We came to the compromise that we did. But so what, if not many people show up to give an opinion about this, they may want to close the public hearing, but they can still deliberate, and they could say, well,
I don't know. I mean, if they send it back to the planning commission to do their bidding, i.e. increase, whatever scenario they finally pick, we would do that language and then bring it back to them. I would leave that public hearing open. That would be my suggestion until it gets back to them with the language that's been revised. And that's the
Right.
cleanest way to do it. And then that gives a chance for the public to continue to voice their opinions. Discourse continues, basically, which is what we want.
Right. And we do not have a time limit in formulating our next proposed revision. Is that correct?
No, but I would think that they would present whatever revision they want with a time specific date for it to be back.
Mhm.
Again, that's the cleanest way to do it instead of leaving it, twisting in the wind.
Right. Chris?
Yeah, this has been going on for quite some time. And while I agree with Mark that we can always get more input, we handed this over to the select board. To some extent, it's now their job, if they think there's more public input that needs to be gotten. But I think sort of redoing the process, unless we're explicitly told to do that by the select board,
Right.
seems to me like it's redundant to what we've done so far. I think we need to, if the select board is so inclined, I think we need to wrap this up, if for no other reason than to give Buttermilk certainty. I mean, yeah, everything that they've said, Josie said this to me directly, suggests that they're not going to move on unit 2 until the interest rates come down, that probably being the main determining factor. But if that happens and there's still an ongoing process about the zoning, that's going to be then that becomes the bottleneck. We don't want to be the bottleneck, at the point where it's possible to start developing unit 2. That's my
Yeah,
feeling.
and part of the delay in commencing construction is that they need to get the financing, and I think this needs to be in place for them to actually try to get financing. They
Agreed.
need to have something assured about the zoning situation when they try to go and get financing.
Yep, good point.
So, Ian, did you have a comment?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Okay, so if we could just be thinking about these questions and, we don't know what they're going to say yet, but let's try to be thinking about them. The fire department has come around to being okay with going up higher than 35 feet. So that, as long as the fire and safety regulations are abided by, which don't have a height limitation, then they are now going to be able to sign off on that.
Right, and I would add to that, Virginia, that we currently are obtaining an opinion from council on this very subject.
Yeah, so that's in the works. The other question that I had is, do we want to try to publicize on the Front Porch Forum the fact that on June 2nd, they're going to be talking about residential density for Jolina Court? To just try to make sure that it's been transparent. The select board doesn't seem to do its own outreach except for publishing the agenda and so forth. But is that something that we want to do, that we want to publicize their hearing?
I think it never hurts to reach out to the public, if we think that they're going to be interested, and I think they will be.
Yeah, I mean, so far, the select board has heard mostly from pro-housing people. And, that's a legitimate point of view. Obviously, the housing committee may want to weigh in. This is a topic that interests them.
If we were to communicate something from the planning commission, would it be to just give kind of both sides of an argument? Or there's not really an argument, I guess, but there's a pro housing and then there's congestion concern, historic preservation concern. I'm not sure.
Well,
How would we
Well-
do that?
Well, I was thinking more just of putting out a front porch forum saying, you know, they are going to be talking about the density on June 2nd at the select board. I wasn't necessarily going to really try to explain all the ramifications or put forth a point of view one way or the other.
Yeah, which is appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to
Yeah.
talk about how many apartments do you want to have here? You know, what are your feelings about it, or what, you know, what do you think a village is like with a large apartment building in it? You know, just
Yeah.
something basic.
I think
Saying,
it would be important to say those numbers though, 70 units.
yeah, although we don't know what they're
Don't
going to
know.
come up with.
70 to 90.
70 to 90 possible units.
We don't know until the select board comes back to us. And in terms of
Okay.
process, the planning commission has made a recommendation to the select board.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So now the
Well-
select board is going to decide what to do with that.
Yep.
So I think getting public involvement in that next meeting makes sense, but we don't know what the select board's going to come back and you know, ask us to take another look at, or potentially, you know, they got a range of things. They could just say, oh, we thought about it and we actually liked what you put forward, so we're going to do that. Or they could say, we didn't like it at all, we're going to do something totally different, and here's what we're going to do. Or number 3 would be, we don't know what we want to do, we want you to think about it some more, here's some here's some more ideas, which
But this is this, or is it not the public's last chance to chime in to the select board?
it's up to the select board.
They're the legislative body that will pass the law.
Yeah, and if they ask us to revise the language in some way, then they're going to have another meeting to
Yep.
present the revised language. So
Mhm.
that will be another chance for people. And, you know, of course, I always hope that they're going to publicize it to get that outreach, but they don't seem to do that. So it seems like we could at least say they're going to have this public hearing, you know, come if you want to talk
Yeah.
about this subject. So,
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think it's a fact that you need to sometimes express what a possible extreme case scenario is to get people to turn their head and look.
yeah. So what I would say about that, Ian, is that after they have told us what they want us to do and have sent it back to us, and we work it up, let's say going to 70 units, and we send it back to them, they will have to have a meeting to adopt it. And that would be when we can say that it is now proposed that there will be 70 units here.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Because
I'm-
they will not adopt it until that has happened, that
Right.
revision.
And I didn't mean to say that it's worst case scenario. I mean, it's a best case scenario if your goal is to have as much housing as possible, you know,
Right.
like, and I don't want to come across as someone who is against this. I'm not. I just,
Yeah.
I think I always kind of feel like I'd like as many people to know what the possibilities are beforehand, so that there's not this last second brouhaha that, you know, always happens. Where people
Well,
feel like they've been left out of the process.
Yeah, if there was a way to
I know,
prevent
it's like,
second
yeah.
brouhaha, you could bottle it and sell it. But-
right. I know.
But you know, the thing I just want to remind everybody is, as a committee and thinking politically here, the planning commission has made a recommendation to the select board. Now,
Yeah.
does that mean that we're not open to changing it? I don't think so. I mean, I haven't heard that from other members of the committee, and certainly it's the select board's prerogative. But until the select board says, we're not accepting that, we're going to change that, that is the recommendation of the planning commission. So I think what makes a lot of sense is to say the select board is considering the recommendation of the planning commission, which has to do with the density of new housing development, you know, in downtown Richmond, you know, get people to come for that. But if we start interpreting what we think the select board is going to be saying or doing with that, we're getting on thin ice.
Yeah, and the only reason that I put those scenarios out there was just so that we could be thinking about
Yeah,
it and
that's
thinking
different.
about what it's going to entail and thinking about the height thing. If we have to put in a lot more units and we don't want it to be bigger, then let's think about the height thing. And the other question that came up was this question about the FEMA buyout properties between the town center and the river, which was suggested by Lock Park to put a road through there. So Keith, you could maybe talk about this question?
Well, it's not much to talk about at this point. I have not pursued this other than talking to Lynn, who's our FEMA overseer, basically. And she feels that we cannot do that, but I would have to get a determination from the state, from Kyle at that point, and I have not had time to do that. We don't own the parcel right now regardless. We haven't received the money for it, so it's really not a huge priority at this point. But we'll get that going as time moves forward. Totally. And I do want to remind the board that, you know, the next UPWP cycle, we're already first in line for a study of the intersection at Bridge, Railroad, and Jolina Court. So I've been given the thumbs up to submit that when we're eligible to do so next year, and we'll get that going also. And that's gonna inform a lot, I feel, of the future. And that's a full build out of not just Jolina Court, but of Railroad Street and of there's subdivisions that are behind the rescue squad that have not been built out. So we need to do a holistic approach to this and see where we are and what the recommendations are going to be.
We do know that you cannot put pavement in a FEMA buyout site.
That's correct.
So there could not be a paved road. The question is a gravel road, which is probably not okay either and not desirable, because in the next flood, all that gravel would end up on Bridge Street. But anyway, Mark.
I just wanted to get some clarification from Keith on that study.
Mhm.
What's coming down the road on that? When is that scheduled? Who's doing it?
So every year, CCRCP releases funds under what's called the UPWPC program, which is a unified program work. I'm not exactly sure what the initials are on that, but what it is.
Unified Planning Work Program.
Yeah, so what that is they allow for grant money for studies specifically towards traffic issues. So that cycle doesn't start until, I think March of next year.
So
Somewhere along
we
those
have
lines.
to apply for a grant by March of next year?
Yeah, we would get in line for that, yeah.
And then when would the study take place?
Shortly after that, if approved, it would begin.
So we're
We would-
already in line for it, right? Right,
So next-
Keith?
Well,
We've
we've been-
already applied for it.
Yes, no, I haven't applied for it. It's not open for application yet.
Okay.
What I have confirmed is that that type of study would be eligible for that grant.
Okay,
That's
so
what's
at
been
some
confirmed.
point, when the UPWP program opens, which is when, I don't know when, but you will put in
Yeah, I think there's
request
an
for
open
this.
period between, just based on this year, between January and March 15th, I think it is, of every year. That's the open period. But I'm not 100% sure on that, but we'll get around to that at some point.
Okay,
So that's going to be long after you guys are expecting to have decisions made about Jolina Court? Is that right?
As far as, well, I mean,
As
Probably.
far as us deciding how many buildings and traffic layout and all of that, we're talking about getting that done by when? July?
July of 26, somewhere around there. Yeah, I would imagine, maybe even later than that. I'm not sure.
so
I'm
the
not sure.
select board will have to take that into consideration, that is what is possible. It is possible for us to have this grant to do this study. Let's say we get it, we will know what mitigation would have to be made for whatever they've decided about, and if that's a concern of theirs, that they want to wait until after the study, then they're going to have to figure out, they're going to decide something about that. Well, I mean, they may feel that whatever the traffic situation is, whatever the numbers are, and we don't have the whole railroad side, that it can be accommodated at that intersection if there are no other options for alternate roads. If that makes them uncomfortable, then they'll have to do whatever they want to, whatever it is that they want to do about it. I mean, I suppose they could have that study done sooner if we paid for it, right, Keith? If we wanted to cough up the $20,000 or whatever it was going to cost.
We haven't broached that subject. I doubt that they would release $20,000 though, but I don't know.
Yeah. So, that's the select board. They will need to take that under consideration in their decision. They know that the study that was done by Jolina Court that was presented for their DRB permit was for 31 residential units in building 2. And we have now, and commercial on the ground floor, we've removed the commercial. Theoretically, there's less traffic from residential. It's only concentrated in the morning and evening peak hours, but there's less than residential traffic coming and going. Than commercial traffic coming and going. So they have that study. They haven't done a study, and we haven't done a study for 70 units, for instance. So
Right.
This is something the select board should hopefully be taking into consideration in their thinking.
And they are aware of it.
Yep. So anyway, I guess everybody was okay with putting out a front porch forum, basically saying that the select board is going to be taking up this question of residential density in the context of revising the planning commission's proposal.
I just want to add to that I'm going to send out a front porch forum posting as a private citizen to make sure that we get as much exposure and clarity on the topic as possible.
Yeah. So as long as you don't mention any numbers, because we don't have any numbers yet.
We have
Except-
ideas of numbers.
We have, well, we don't know what the select board is going
45
to ask
isn't
us.
enough. 60 isn't enough. I heard numbers you were just kicking around of anywhere from 70 to 90 units.
Yeah, but we don't know that they're going to ask us for that. That's just for our personal thinking about it. The only numbers we know are the numbers that we sent to the select board as our recommendation.
And then they said, did they send us a memo specifically about that?
Nope,
About what they wanted to see changed?
no,
Just
not
wanted
in
to
terms
say-
of residential density.
Well, how could they possibly keep their meeting open for this then? Because it's not like we're going to get back to them by June 2nd with numbers, right?
That's
No,
not
at the June 2nd meeting, they're going to tell us what they want us to do in terms of residential density. And it's going to come back to us if they make any changes from what we have submitted to them regarding residential density. That was the plan. They're going to take the part about the commercial on the ground floor of building 1. Buttermilk expressed that they were hemorrhaging money because they couldn't fill that commercial space. So the first step to get done relatively quickly, knowing that some of these other steps might take longer, was to get that building 1 ground floor commercial thing resolved. They will resolve that at June 2nd. And on June 2nd, they will go to the next phase of this and tell us how they want the residential density component to be revised. So, and then they will send it back, and if they make any changes, send it back, and then we will have to work with it for a while, and then we will send it back to them again, and they will have to open the subject up again, either
Okay.
as part of their hearing or as a, as their
So-
deliberative result. So,
But they definitely want a lot more than the 45/60 with density bonuses that we've proffered.
well, that was their initial feeling at the meeting, but because their final recommendation or requirement to us was not formulated then, as they think about it more, I mean, as Chris said, maybe they'll come to the decision that those are too many. We don't know. Their initial feeling at that meeting, and you were there, was that they wanted more density, and the pro-housing the pro-housing crowd was there saying we have a housing crisis, our friends can't live here. We would like to have more density. We would like to have more units. They were positive about that sentiment that was expressed by members of the audience, but they haven't made any decisions yet. So it is premature for us to talk about the decisions. I think we should just have people come to that.
Premature for a official planning commission post, but as a concerned citizen, in the same way that various people have posted how much they want more density, I think as a private citizen, I'm going to offer my perspective.
Okay, I just would ask you not to put those numbers in there because we don't
Why
know.
not? Those are numbers. We're already at 45/60, and that's insufficient. So it's not like they're going to go down. They're going up.
Yeah, well,
But
put in our numbers that we sent to them, and
If we give
going to increase. They may be going to increase these at their meeting that they're going to talk about on June 2nd.
Mark, I just think it would be really irresponsible to put in any communication out to the public this time anything other than the recommendation we made to the select board. Virginia has done some scenario analysis for us here. That's great, but that we have no idea what the select board's going to do.
No, we don't. I just don't want to make decisions, and I'm not going to be here for the next month and a half, so I don't know. I don't want this being blown through before I, even have a voice on the matter. So if we let people know that the select board is not satisfied and wants more than 45 and wants higher buildings.
Well, we
see
don't
anything
know
wrong.
that that's going to be their final recommendation.
Yeah.
No, we don't know, but it's a possibility.
Well, but a lot of
We
things.
know they don't like 45. These are public meetings.
I would
Yeah.
just encourage people to come to the meeting and hear about residential density and think about the amount of density that they are comfortable with. So, if you can do that without alleging anything that the select board
Alleging's an interesting term, but
is going to do, because we don't have that information yet.
okay.
You will
I'm
be
just
able to
telling
put
you-
another post after they have made a decision and told us what they want us to do. They will have to bring it back for public hearing. So you can then say, look, they've proposed that we alter it to such and such a number, because then that will be factual. That will be true. This is just this is only for us to think about these numbers. It is not a good idea. It's like rumors spreading if you put it out there. So just get people to come and talk about residential density, please.
I certainly will.
All right, so we will do the front porch forum probably next week before the agenda is published. I'll put out a front porch forum. Okay, so if there's no other comments about that, let's go on to number 7. The Tier 1B non-opt-in recommendation. So Keith wrote this letter that you have in the packet. Which says basically the Planning Commission's recommendation, after discussion and review and public discussions, the Richmond Planning Commission has decided to forward a recommendation to not opt in to Tier 1B. And he lists some pros and cons at the bottom of the letter. The pros: reduced permitting cost and time for the developers. This is why Buttermilk wants this. And it is considered a barrier to housing. I will mention that the Housing Committee is going to send a letter to the Select Board recommending to opt in to 1B. Pros are the ability to receive some grants and programs associated with the 1B category. What it implies is that there will be complete local administrative control over the process, as they are not going through Act 250, which requires robust zoning and staff time and capability of reviewing these projects. So the upshot of it, and the reason that the 1B program was designed, was to promote housing, more housing, take away regulatory burdens. So we go down to the cons for opting in, which are that it is more staff time and involvement, and regulatory will have to make some adjustments to the zoning regulations to make it robust enough to cover what Act 250 covers. The cost of review is borne by the municipality. If we want to have an engineering review, it's not borne by the new land use board, the Act 250 board, but us and attorneys. We have to have the ability for local review to be thorough. The builder, the developer may have reduced access to grants, and so it may result in lower numbers of housing starts. So, is this the letter that you want to send to the select?
I think it's close. Keith, I really appreciate this. I found myself feeling a little confused when I hit the cons of opt-in section. I'm just not sure that these are all actually framed as cons of opting in. So cost review borne by municipality, that is a con of opting in, and I think that's important. It's good that that's first. Reduced ability to access grants and programs. Virginia, when you read that, you said that was for the developer.
Correct.
Because in the pros of opting in, there's also something about loss of ability to access grants and programs.
If you opt in,
I think
those
in
are-
my
if you opt in, the
my brain I
programs
was
are
confused
available.
between the two.
If you opt in, the programs and grants would be available. If you opt out, they would be reduced in ability or availability.
Okay, so a con of okay. Oh, okay. No, yeah. Okay.
And that accrues mostly to the developer. I'm not sure there are any municipal
Correct.
grants that are not available if you do not opt into 1B, are there, Keith? I don't know.
Well, they haven't been developed, to be honest with you, because the
Right.
land use review board hasn't been sitting.
It's true. The
So-
Land Use Review Board has to develop the rules and the guidelines for this program before July 1st, 2027. That was why the interim 1B was put in place, so that everybody could benefit from it, or whatever you want to call it. Everybody was included in the program until the rules were actually developed.
Yeah.
So, but that is considered to be one of the things that is going to be an advantage to developers, is they might have other programs available to them.
I think that detail might be important to the select board. I don't, I mean, you all know that group better than I do for sure, but just a little bit more details about the grants and programs, whatever we know about them, or just the fact that they're not really developed yet.
Yeah, there's a promise by the legislature that would happen. I mean, that's kind of the basis of this opt-in, opt-out issue. That's one of
Yeah.
the carrots. That's a carrot, for lack of a better term. And it's
Yeah.
a nebulous carrot at this point. So I don't
Right.
know.
I imagine, I think that this list, that's maybe like one of the first questions that this begs is like, oh, well, how much money are we leaving on the table as a town, by not opting into this? And if the answer is we don't really know, and we don't really know what those are going to look like, then that is what it is, but we should maybe say that, just to preempt that question. I think ability for local review to be thorough, to my memory, was the primary con that we,
Mhm.
or that was maybe important to this group when we were talking about it. And I kind of have a feeling that I want that to come out more in the recommendation, that like we're recommending no in great part because we think that it would be very challenging for us to do a sufficient review at the local level to protect our, to do the environmental review. Yeah, I think that just like the way that it's worded. I don't know exactly what I would suggest for wording, but I think the way that it's worded now and being sort of like the third item makes it feel easy to gloss over, where it feels central to our opinion as a board.
Yeah. And it's, the fourth bullet is related to that one. They could be discussed really together.
Yep, they could be. Slower housing start.
So,
con of opting in is that the housing starts. I'm confused about bullet 5. Is bullet 5 a con of opting in?
No, it's a con, the con of opting in. If you do not opt in, the negative of not opting in is that slower housing starts will happen. The pro of
I
opting in,
think
the pro of opting in is that without the review, in theory, the review would be faster. And housing starts, in theory, would start earlier.
yeah, I'm not sure that needs to be there.
I think that bullet 5 is actually a pro of opt. I don't think it's a con of opt. I just think conceptually it isn't. It maybe belongs differently in the category above. A pro of opting in would be that faster housing starts
Correct,
apply.
because you don't have a 250 review.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think if we just take that away, that line, it is covered in the pros. That you get faster housing starts if you
Yeah,
opt
it
in.
is.
That's fine.
It's just covered. We don't really need to have that in there.
Yeah.
And, we could have more of an explanation as to why procedurally, we find that we feel that it would be challenging to do a good job. We could put that in, you know, we could bolden that up, that numbers 4, 3, and 4 bullets.
Yeah.
I'll do that later. I'm not gonna do this now. Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna
Yeah.
get rid of, that 5th bullet on the con. And you
Yeah,
want
get
me,
rid of the last bullet and,
I honestly think you can get rid of the last 2 bullets because you're going to expand the 3rd one. And you've already said the 4th one in the pro as well, just to reduce like the duplication. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion about that. My strong opinions are remove number 5 and expand number 3.
okay. And, you know, I mean, the con should, like for number 3, it should be expressed as difficulty for local review to be thorough, not ability. I mean, I understand your point, Brighton. It's not exactly, but it was originally, the cons were like the pros of opting out was what it was. That paragraph was originally was about opting out, but Josh's recommendation was to have a pros and cons of opting in, which changed the need for some wording, I think, in there. Like ability
Yeah.
is
now,
a neutral word. What we need is something that's bad about opting in, which is that there's a reduced ability, or, you know, there's a
Difficulty.
difficulty for the local review to be thorough. So we can work
Yeah.
on it a little bit. Is Charlie
kind of-
Baker coming, by the way, Keith, to that June 2nd meeting to talk about Tier 1B?
no, I think Taylor will be there.
Oh, Taylor is going to be there? Okay, so somebody from CCRPC is going to come, and they're probably going to have a pro opting in stance,
Oh, totally. Yes,
because they want this program to, because the state has told them that you need to do this for more housing. So short of making it required for municipalities to accept 1B, they've made it optional, but the Regional Planning Commission is promoting it. So and, you know, I mean, I think all of us are conflicted in a way about it, somewhat conflicted in a way about it.
yeah,
It works. It's another one of the initiatives that the legislature has put forth that is more suitable for some of the bigger towns. You know, South Burlington, if they have a staff of 8 in their planning department and they're used to doing these kinds of reviews, and, you know, it just might work for them, and there might be all about it. For the smaller towns, it's challenging to think that we have suitable regulations, especially since it's new and we haven't made those suitable regulations yet. You know, I mean, I guess we have until 2027 to make new regulations that assure us that our DRB review is going to actually take into consideration the things that we have been relying on Act 250 for up until now. So, you know, I mean, and then the other point is that it's kind of moot because there's nowhere except for Jolina Court. And the buttermilk people are going to be lobbying heavily for an opt-in, because it's definitely going to affect them unless they put more than 50 units in their building. But, you know, previously they've talked about 45 units in the building, so they may decide to keep it under 50 in order to get the benefit of the opt-in if the select board opts in.
right.
That is
And
also
say-
something we don't know, but
Right, and save those additional dwelling units that they have in their back pocket for a third building potentially. That would
Yeah.
be, that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, and if we, if we only put it up somewhat, so that, let's say they're allowed 52 units instead of 45 units in building 2, they're probably not going to put those extra 2 units in because
Right.
it's going to be more advantageous to them to not have to pay for an Act 250 review and have it, the time and the money. The other thing we don't quite know about Jolina Court is whether it's automatic that they will be allowed to opt in, even if the select board allows the town to be an opt-in town. They are already, for their project, under an Act 250 permit. So if this wasn't happening, this 1B thing, and they made changes, well, they haven't gotten an Act 250 amendment to their permit for building 2. Their permit that they got from Act 250 only considered building 1 and these theoretical other buildings, but they knew that they would need to come back and amend their Act 250 permit if they made changes like adding another building. So we have talked to the Act 250 people, and they don't really know for sure whether this, because they're already under a pre-existing Act 250 permit, whether they would actually be required to still be under that permit, and so that Tier 1B wouldn't apply to them. They're kind of thinking that they wouldn't need to get an amendment because the second building is like a different project, even though it's part of the same project. It's a gray area, and they would have to have a final resolution to whether or not they would be eligible for the 1B from the Act 250 board or the new land use review board that hasn't made the rules about it yet. I mean, it's just.
Right, and they would have to get a jurisdictional opinion for starters. I mean, that they have to get a JO.
Yeah, a jurisdictional opinion is a written statement from the Act 250 board that says you do have to get an amendment or you don't have to get an amendment.
Right.
That is a formal letter from the Act 250 board to which you have applied. So it's like the grayest of gray areas because so many things right now are up in the air about the program. They are assuming that they will not have to get an amendment to their permit and will not have to go through Act 250 again if the town opts in. That is their position. And so they're going to be lobbying for the opt-in. And it's probably correct, but we don't really know. So, Brighton.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just looking more at this letter, acknowledging there's a lot we don't know about this situation. Certainly it is gray. But in terms of the recommendation we're making, I sort of remembered a concern I had when I was reading this yesterday. I think in the opt-in section, but my reading of that, and maybe others, would be that these should be a list of things that would be bad if we opted in. So if we opted in, I think we need to say, like, instead of ability for local review to be thorough is sort of framed a little bit backwards. For example, like I think it would, the implication is that local review would struggle to be thorough. That I just wanted to make that framing more clear and also rescind my recommendation of removing item 4, because now that I'm reading the whole letter again, I actually think that the parallelism is really helpful. Those were my 2 clarifying comments.
So for item 3, are you saying that you want it to say it would be difficult for local review to be thorough?
Yeah, or local review would not reach the level of thoroughness of Act 250 review, something to that extent.
For the cons.
For the cons, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, Virginia, they should all be like negative statements because they're cons.
Right.
But yeah, that's all.
Okay. All right.
Otherwise,
Well,
I think good.
I think that we'll have to work on this to achieve that. Does anyone else have any comments they want to make about this? Is this the position that we're still taking? Okay, so I'm assuming that's a yes, since nobody is saying anything different. And, you know, the select board will have to, this is another decision they're gonna have to make. They're gonna have to decide whether the difficulties that we foresee happening with having to review these projects under Act 250 outweighs the fact that it's a hindrance to housing or not, you know, or whether we need to try to have more housing and face the difficulties that we see with this review and the possible costs to the municipalities of additional studies. So that's their job. They're going to have to do that.
That's why they get paid so well.
Yep, it's a high-paying job. And they will also have to listen to regional planning, promote it, but, you know. All right, so if there's no other comments about that, we'll move on. We'll fix this up. Okay, so another item that has to do with regional planning. So it turned out that the deadline for submitting your comments was allegedly May 19th. And we had been going under the impression that it was late spring. Well, all of a sudden, it turned out the definition was May 19th. And, you know, I mean, I guess that's my fault for not being aware of that. We spent the time that we would have had in December and November thinking about the bogus NDA question when we should have been thinking about this question. That turned out to be a complete red herring. So, you know, we started looking at this in January. We had all these other things to do. So anyway, I have told Charlie Baker, the head of the Regional Planning Commission, that Richmond would try to submit some recommendations by the end of this month of May. They claim they've closed the hearings, but they will consider what we are saying. So we assume that they will consider it. The Housing Committee has not submitted anything yet, and they are definitely working on a plan that they wish to submit. And the Conservation Commission is thinking about the outlying areas, the green and blue areas on this map, and they will be submitting a recommendation also. Regular people can also submit anything they want to say about this map. The Select Board at its last meeting on the 19th wished to have something by the deadline of May 19th. So in order to give them something to have for the deadline, we took the recommendations of the Housing Committee that they had already decided upon and approved and added that to the map and that was the best we could do for the 19th. That was all the information we have. And there's a short note in the packet that says what the changes are that we agreed. Keith and I thought the Planning Commission would agree, and we're sorry we didn't have time to ask you all about this, but you know, we can make another recommendation. Were to change the far parcel that, you know, we've talked about, the far upland parcel where they still want it to remain in farming, but for the future, way down the line, putting it in transition, which basically is a category that means you think it might be good for it to be allowed to go to higher residential density. It's the same category as the gateway. We put that property in the transition area on the map, keeping in mind that this map of the Regional Planning Commission has no teeth. It is our zoning that governs what can actually be done. But the transition designation may allow you to have more commercial, more residential in that area. It doesn't seem like it was a negative for the FARs to have this designation. So we put that in, and also the large 160-acre parcel that's behind the GMP solar array up near exit 11. That is a place that we moved from rural ag and forestry into rural general, which also gives them a little more ability to have more housing and commercial work. So those were the two changes that we suggested to this map. If the Planning Commission would like to look at this map and work more on it, we can do that and make more recommendations. The Conservation Commission is working heavily at it. They're looking at parcels. They're looking at what's in current use. They're looking at, you know, actual forest blocks. They feel that the time is really too short to do a good job with this, which is, you know, what we've always felt, that the time for meaningful outreach is way too short. But since the map right now doesn't actually mean anything, that's the best we can do. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about this or wants to work further on this map. You know, the language around this map is that the municipalities and the Regional Planning Commission will collaborate on a map. It doesn't, you know, the Regional Planning Commission, in the absence of any testimony from anybody, is just going to do whatever they want. So they're going to use this map. If they don't get any testimony, they apparently have taken lots of individual comments about the map because people look at their particular property because it's got property lines on it, which we have tried to avoid with our future land use map, to avoid that. And just thinking of myself, the number of times that I have considered the Regional Planning Commission future land use map in the last 8 years is 0. So I don't know exactly what the value of this plan is going to be. It was mandated by the state to make all the maps all over the state use the same designations and have the same kind of maps. So, you know, we don't think kindly of regional planning for doing this to us, but they don't think kindly of the state for doing it to them either. So, yeah. So anybody want to talk about it? Do you want to talk more about this map? Do you want to think about the designations? The other problem has been that the designations are vague and they're overlapping and they are not necessarily kind of one size fits all. They may work for some of the bigger towns. They don't seem to apply very well. A couple of things that I can say, since you're looking at the map, is that green area, the dark green in the upper right-hand corner. The Conservation Commission is thinking of putting all the rest of that blue up there, most of which is already conserved in that upper right-hand quadrant, into conservation area, that green. That is going to be on their recommendation because I've spoken with them. They were thinking about the Andrews Forest, whether it should be a resource-based recreation area like that Cochrane's piece, which is right in the middle, kind of whitish. That's a resource-based recreation area. That was the designation that the Regional Planning Commission put that in. So they're also thinking about increasing the width of the riparian corridors to allow for more animal movement. Those are just a few of the things that I heard that they were doing. The
Question?
Housing Committee made those two recommendations that we already said Keith and I agreed with, and they had one other one, which was the Sadler Meadows parcel, which there is some that's up kind of in the high density area. Valley View, yeah, up in there, that piece right there. It's the rest of the Danny Pete farm up the Jericho Road. It's nestled in residential areas. Why should that not have more of a residential designation? Well, most of it is in conservation, is conserved, but there are some possible housing with some constraints. It's a questionable parcel, and the Housing Committee wished to put that also into ag general instead of ag forestry and rural ag and forestry. Ian.
You said this map has no teeth,
It has no teeth at the moment.
so it doesn't affect what someone can do with their property.
It does not.
Okay.
You know, the only caveat I would say is that the state has become more interested in local zoning
Yes.
because they felt that the towns didn't go along with their recommendations. So in the future, will this map ever have any kind of impact? We don't really know, but at the moment, the Regional Planning Commission will tell you this doesn't have any impact on what anybody can do with their land. That is the local zoning, municipal zoning. But, you know, they say our map and their map are supposed to align.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So I am just looking to find out if the Planning Commission wishes to make any recommendations about this map other than what Keith and I have already said we're okay with, which is those two parcels being changed slightly, their designations. When you read the way the designations are written, it's hard to understand sometimes which one would be more suitable. But basically the parcel up behind the Green Mountain Power Solar Array near exit 11 becomes a little bit more able to have residences and commercial. And the Far Farm as transitional is a place that we think we might someday wish to have more density. So, you know, it's vague, but it doesn't seem to bind you to anything. Yeah, as you get nearer to the top, to the dark purple, it's more dense. And then as you go lower down on this chart, you get a little bit less dense, more natural resource oriented, until you get to the most natural resource oriented category, which is the conservation, rural conservation. And that's all taken off the Vermont Conservation Design and the Biofinder of the plans about which areas are really important for natural resources.
So I would say that if you have any comments, forward them.
Yeah. If we have no comments, then we will not make a planning commission recommendation.
Right.
So,
And
and
what do
we
I
don't really
think-
know if the select board is gonna try to make a recommendation, but anybody can make a recommendation, any committee, any person. It's kind of up in the air whether they add more weight if the town select board makes a recommendation. We don't really know that. So it's all a little vague and unsatisfactory, but
Yeah, I have no comments. I'm sorry.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's difficult to to look at these maps and really understand the implications of anything that one might do. So,
Well,
you know.
you definitely have to take a deep dive to understand everything that's going on there. Definitely a time commitment.
yeah. And we did look at our future land use map in our 2018 town plan, the fuzzy map, which if anyone who worked on that remembers, we put that in there so there would not be parcel boundaries, so people could not look at their lots and say, well, what does that mean for my lot? There aren't any. It's fuzzy, and it's sort of generally in accord with the map that the regional planning has now presented us with. You know, this kind of a green area up there in the upper right-hand corner, and the village is kind of more dense, and, you know, it's non-specifically sort of similar to the other map. And we're going to be revising it now in the course of the town plan work, but it'll probably be somewhat similar. It won't have these names that the new regional map has. We're not really planning to put those names in there. They're going to have to make the alignment, you know, theoretical. So anyway, I'm not hearing anybody leaping in that they want to look at this map and study it closely.
Lots of crickets.
So it's daunting. I mean, frankly, it's daunting, and I'm okay with that, and with the people who actually want to look into it and who look heavily into these properties, who know something about some of the properties, since the properties are actually outlined as properties, like the Housing Committee and the Conservation Committee. If they want to work on it, then that's fine. They should do it and submit it. All right, so moving on. I'm not hearing anything else. Updates. Okay, so we have a few minutes. The Town Plan Committee is great, and they're working along. They're making progress with their outreach efforts. We have put together a very rough draft of the staffing needs that we're going to have for these events that are planned. 4th of July table at Volunteers Green, the 2 days of workshops or charrette in the library, farmers market tabling, and we're going to need planning commissioners to staff some of these. There's not enough people in the steering committee to staff all of these events all the time. So this is in the packet. The dates of some of these things haven't been set yet, but I think that all of the planning commissioners should take turns being at some of these booths. So if you all could think about it, when we have the dates, by our next meeting, we will have the dates for these things. I'm hoping, like the farmers markets, we've got the dates of the workshop. You know, we might have a shift of a couple of hours, and we will want planning commissioners to sign up, especially if we only have one meeting in June. These things are starting in July. we're gonna need people to sign up. So please think about when you could come, and we will get more information to you about the content of these, but obviously they're going to be giving out information. A survey has been created. We'll be giving out the survey, helping people to do the survey, and trying to do as much outreach as possible. We'll have our banner that Ian is working on, right, Ian?
Worked on it today.
All right.
I'll
We will
sign
have
up for the 4th
posters.
and the 12th.
All right, great. We have our first sign.
And then I'll definitely sign up for farmers markets once that's known.
Okay, the 12th and yeah,
The
so
4th. Yeah.
the 4th of July table. Okay.
Yeah.
Becca, and we can talk about the time, you know, if you want to come for a shorter period or a longer period. And then the workshops are 5 or 6 hours, so probably half of that, I would think, would be a shift.
Yeah, that would be fine with me. That's a weekend, so I'm right now I'm
Great.
fully open.
Yay, excellent. And also possibly a farmer's market. All right. And then there's the elusive pool party, but we're not quite talking about that yet. Anyway. So if anyone else wants to volunteer now, that's fine. Otherwise, at our next meeting, I would like to get volunteers to help with this effort. The Planning Commission is ultimately responsible for this town plan work, so it would be good to get everybody involved.
I'll check my calendar. I think possibly can do the 12th.
Okay, sounds good. And we'll have more information about exactly what, you will have handouts to give out. There will be, you'll have information to look at to help people understand and also to take their information down. Some charts with red and green dots and all kinds of things. So, all right. I think that's it. Anybody else have any other updates or comments about anything or?
Well, so we're talking about housing tonight? A
The
little
housing
bit?
targets?
Well, I was just gonna let you know, I had a conversation with a couple of local business people regarding the town plan this week, and
Yeah,
one of the things that came up with both of them was that most of their employees don't live in Chittenden County
Yeah.
because they just can't afford to live here.
What?
And they work in Richmond. So, I mean, we've talked about it, but it's real.
It's town employees also.
Yeah.
Just
right. Yeah. So housing is definitely one of the things that we're going to be talking about at the workshop. The workshop is going to have current problems, current challenges that we face that we want to get input about and that we want to try to give people some idea about what the possibilities are for doing something about it. I mean, I think we all agree there's this housing shortage. What are we doing about it? Well, maybe we should opt into Tier 1B. I don't know. Anyway, so housing is definitely on our list of current challenges. And then we put in a section about future challenges because, this is Airbnb. Do we want to have people talk a little bit about that, what they think about it, get some input for what we're going to be faced with? Cannabis. Do we want to, do people care at all about cannabis? Do they want to have regulations? We have not opted into having recreational cannabis stores in our town. Do we want to think about that? What about the odor? Do we want to have any rules about it? And, my thought so far about that is basically asking people, do you want to let this play out or do you want to have rules about it? Because the Planning Commission should know if a lot of people want to have rules about something like Airbnb or, Anyway, so that'll be a future problems kind of section part of the workshop. But Yeah, I mean, housing, it's a problem. Okay, so more information on that will be coming. We could have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
it's good to be back. Thank you.
Yay.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, who's seconding this motion?
I
To
am.
adjourn. Mark is seconding the motion to adjourn. Any further discussion? Does anybody not want to adjourn? Okay, so we stand adjourned. We'll see you all on the 2nd.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
all.